You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of Data Center Therapy. It is good to be back. I am your host, Matt, Decelerated Yeti. Yeah, in more ways than one. Trust me on this. You'll see. You'll see. I'm joined by my co-host, as always, Mr. Matt Cozzolino. Matt, how are you?
I'm great. And yourself?
Good. It's good to see you. I've even got the monitor knob turned up a little bit so I can hear myself, which I can still hear myself outside the headphones. So, but I like it.
There's a difference between hearing yourself in the room and hearing yourself feedback through the audio system, through the
harkening back to my days of playing with my parents' answering machine. I never liked the sound of my own voice. Period.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does, though.
Find that mute button. No. And you may have heard, yes, we are joined by our very own Ryan Grelck. Ryan, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Mute.
All right, Ryan Grelck here. I'm the accelerated Ryan, I think.
You're accelerated.
For this one.
Multi-threaded.
But did you buy the licensing for that? Have you enabled that feature?
Because dang.
Days of just buying
What's
the
your
hardware.
markup? How much do you cost on the black market these days?
It's Kazzo's favorite topic. If there's buying the hardware and then there's enabling the features of that hardware you just paid money for. Can't do anything with until you pay the license.
Yes.
Yay.
Don't let me have the thing I just paid for.
The car subscription as a service is really hopefully going to be the breaking point where people are like, enough, but people are begging for it.
I mean, if my biggest, so with that, my biggest issue is the presentation of it. If you present it as a service that you subscribe to, and I'm subscribing to this thing, cool. Then I know what I'm doing up front.
Mm-hmm.
If here's this thing and you're buying it and, you can't use it or you can't this or you can't that, unless you pay a subscription to it, that's like, F you.
What's the difference between a subscription and a lease? I mean,
what you're getting in a lease.
Well,
you're saying,
with a lease, there's usually no upfront cost
years.
either.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There isn't. You're not buying anything in the first place. It's a rental.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where, Anyway, this is not data center rant. I mean, it is. It is. That's why we need therapy. Right. But yeah, so we've got an interesting topic today, and that's why we have Mr. Grelck joining us. Kazzo, why don't you dive into a little bit what we're going to be jumping into? Well,
so I've been seeing quite a bit about video cards, and I know we've been talking I've talked to some of the other guys from NVIDIA, and they've got some cool stuff that they're doing around video cards, but NVIDIA, I guess, is the only one that I've personally known as like they're the video card company, which is kind of a not the only thing that they do. They do a lot of machine learning. They do a lot of other stuff like that. But now I'm seeing stuff from Intel and AMD about their video card offerings and some of the other stuff that they're providing, some of the new products they're providing. And I mean, I'm kind of interested to see what we can do, because I mean, is there someone else that's going to displace NVIDIA now? That's kind of, my question there.
Well, I'm surprised, if I can jump in on you, Ryan. I'm just surprised that apparently video card stuff is not easy. Like the technology itself, and I guess it comes down to chip fab and purpose-built silicon. But it's amazing that we're here this far down the line, and it really is kind of a one-horse game. And then there's these players on the periphery that
it's kind of like a monopoly, but not.
It's because there's just no one else doing it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think it's also one of those things where you can't just get it rolling in your garage. I mean, not many things are, but the amount of capital, it's not even in modest investment. You're talking billions with a B to get the ball rolling. And it just, what are the stakes at this point? And now you're getting in line with everybody else for a foundry to actually make the chips and all of this, and forget about the R&D on it all.
That's a whole different thing. The foundry, the machines, the chip fab machines that make them. Yeah.
I think there's tons of patents too. I think it's really litigiously protected. You saw Apple, it took them better part of a decade to get from, what were they using? The Power VR or Power? They were using the GPU technology in the earlier iPhones, and it was licensed out. And then they finally came through and transitioned to their own. But there were legal things tie up with that too, in terms of you can't just go ahead and do it yourself.
There's always licensed stuff in our technology for sure.
I think that's one of the ones that Like to our licensing rant from earlier, that's one of the things with NVIDIA is here's this card, but you know, F you if you want to use it for VDI on an ESX host or something. That's not, you didn't pay for a license to be able to do this.
Funny you mentioned that. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah. Licensing, always
Right.
the fun part of our job.
So
Ryan,
that
is, I mean, when, like, if I'm building an ESXi cluster for the purposes of running Horizon VDI, it sounds like it's a good idea, Ryan, to want to accelerate that user experience with GPUs.
Oh yeah, definitely. The OS and a bunch of the applications prefer to be GPU accelerated by default. Most of the time when I'm building out VDIs, I'm disabling all of that, for the user experience, because when 3D accelerations run without a GPU, it's using CPU resources.
It's basically emulating a GPU with
exactly,
CPU.
and it'll
super inefficient.
Use a ton of compute unnecessarily. So we disable that. Well, if we toss a GPU in there for your users, they're going to have a better experience, or they may be able to run like CAD applications or other applications like that can be accelerated.
Is there anyone else other than NVIDIA right now that we can actually like leverage that hardware and put in an ESX host in a data center today?
As it sits right now, NVIDIA is the only player in the game.
There was all that vaporware rumor that AMD was on the cusp, right?
Well, AMD had cards, but they've been essentially deprecated. They're like 2 or 3 generations old. Wow. So you used to be able to buy AMD cards for VDI. Okay. Unfortunately, nowadays you could pretty much only get AMD acceleration through like any of the cloud providers. So like an EC2 instance with the AMD GPUs attached, which is kind of a bummer. I'd love to have competition. Intel's going to be joining the data center GPU and actually desktop, GPU market also. I mean, they're getting into GPUs.
The revered Intel integrated graphics that we all know and love.
That's actually, I mean, when we talk about Plex, that's the one that transcoding works with, right?
That's right. But I mean, at the same time, that was really facetious originally too, because well, I'm a Mac user, right? So not the MacBook Pros. For a while, what Apple was doing, they would have the CPU with the integrated graphics, the Intel integrated graphics, but they would also have like a discrete NVIDIA chip. And for a while, you could choose to use the dedicated, hurt your battery, or the integrated, but you'd have to log out to switch it. And then they enabled the automatic graphic switching, which is supposed to be smart about that. And but ultimately, just looking at the benchmarks, right, those integrated graphics were pretty atrocious. And not that Apple's been known for gaming and all of that kind of stuff, but they're using x86 chips, right? They're using the same chips that were going into some of the budget PCs too. So it just seems like the dedicated GPU is the only way to go when you want any kind of stuff. And it's funny because those VDI experiences that you're talking about, Ryan, it's not that you have, let's say all your features are on the graphic, you're not losing anything by not having a GPU. You're simply emulating all those things that otherwise would be offloaded onto the GPU with your CPU now, which just, you've probably cut in half at least the amount of VMs that can run on that host, if not more, if you burden the CPU with that acceleration.
Yep.
Well, that's also because the CPU and the GPU are like fundamentally different in how they work, right?
Right.
So
and the GPU is orders of magnitude faster than a CPU.
And well, I mean, it's got like billions or trillions of, I want to say, cores in it, right?
Transistors, yeah.
Okay, right.
Well, yeah. I mean,
but you're right. No, I think they have like hundreds of cores or whatever in the sense that we think of it from a CPU.
Right.
But they also have to do. They only have 4 operations that they know they're doing.
They only do like 4 things or something, right? And they just do it a gazillion times a second. Yep. Whereas a CPU, we can anything.
I'm going to point the finger at the OS vendors. I mean, it started, I think, with Windows Vista, with the translucency and whatever they called that. You like the whole thing was
Arrow.
Yes, you're right.
Arrow.
Yeah.
Oh,
and it was just And it's like, okay, it's an operating system, right? But no, got to have the shiny, got to have that sparkly bezel on the front of it.
User experience, man.
And now you take something that should just kind of be minimal and fade into the background, or at least enable you to use applications that might need acceleration. And now you're burning all of these resources on the pretty animations in your operating system. That really, from a VDI standpoint, annoys me. At least it annoys me, Mr. Grelck. I don't know about you.
Oh yeah. When I do my builds, I don't make it so that your Windows session is just god awful, ugly, and
give me Windows 3.1, baby. Give me the boxes, the hard edges.
So I at least make it a little pretty, but you can really strip out all of that niceness, prettiness that
Minesweeper OS
Windows has.
Minesweeper. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you like get good at that? Did you ever get good at that?
I don't
figure out what the numbers were for?
I don't think I ever understood.
Yeah. It's how many far away.
How many mines are touching the square with a number in it?
Yeah.
Yes. And I feel like there was a light bulb moment in my life when that was realized by me. It just was it was so late in the game that I think the bulk of my time never understanding what the heck I was doing overrides that. And when I go
back to play Minesweeper these days, right?
I think I understood at the time, and I was clicking, and it still didn't seem to match up with my newfound understanding. I was like, I can't do this. Never mind. Give me Grand Theft Auto top down original.
Yeah, I had a friend who could do the 100 by 100 Minesweeper games. I couldn't understand it. He was very patient.
That's like the Rubik's Cube of Windows 3.1 era
like paint
games.
By numbers, one of those adult paint by numbers with the.
I like the Solitaire. I love Solitaire on 3.1.
Solitaire is awesome. Yeah, that's a great game.
That's a classic.
Pinball with anyone?
I remember Pinball. Pinball game was part of Plus 98, right?
I think that was the one that was supposed to
Space Cadet.
Use the video card though. Like, hey, here's this cool thing that actually uses a video card.
And so that game's been lost. The source code's been lost, but people have
reverse
engineered it.
You're talking
and I saw a video of that game running on the Steam Deck, which runs on Linux, which is just awesome. I think
that's too cool.
Yeah.
Back in the days of those accelerations, I got into computers when I was 9 or 10, something like that. And I would get those big computer shopper magazines, the huge, basically catalogs, right? And I flipped through those. And it was just
with computer stuff.
Circle all of the things I wanted. Yeah,
exactly. I remember
catalogs right now.
lusting after a certain CPU or whatever. And I'd get through, and finally my dad knew someone, and I'll have to, now that I'm remembering this, my gosh, I haven't talked about this, this part of my life in a long time. So I'm thinking back, I'm gonna have to talk to my dad about it. But I got to the point where I was starting to build computers, and this is in my early teens, and this is before 3DFX, or right on the cusp of 3DFX. And I remember I was going through this. He knew this guy who was a nice guy, but
drove a truck.
No, it was like he lived in a big old house that had a smell. He had this old big furry sheepdog kind of thing that he was mean to, which sucked. And he's a weird guy. And he would build a computer for me. And I remember wanting a 3D accelerator card, and he just couldn't seem to. I don't think he knew there were 2D cards at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could get the GPU, and then so I think 3DFX was just coming out, but he was maybe unfamiliar with it, and so he gave me some kind of maybe it was a creative brand. I think SoundBlast. They also made GPUs for a while there.
Having to buy that sound card too. Yeah.
Oh yeah. What's really crazy though about that is NVIDIA made a lot of those chips back then for those video cards.
The brand of the card had nothing to do with it, but they had there were only a handful of chips that you wanted that you would have to load the drivers for. Hopefully you have them for the version. And I was running, I think, well, this is a little bit later in my life, but I eventually was using Windows 2000 Pro as my workstation, and I loved it. But for gaming, that was more of a challenge because all of the drivers and stuff most of them worked, but XP,
yeah, good old XP.
I was doing Windows 2000 also because that was the best performance I would be able to get out of Quake. It had like perfect OpenGL performance back then.
We can do. Yeah.
It was so clean. I was partial to Unreal Tournament, by the way.
Oh man, I watched a documentary on Unreal Tournament. I'll send it to you guys later.
Maybe put the link.
Awesome.
We'll put the link in the blog. If Neil's
Yeah.
listening here. He'll put the link in. He'll
There
find
you
it.
go. There you go.
I was
God,
good at UT. I would, that was when I would play it online. And this early days, I had Time Warner Cable Roadrunner service.
There you go.
And Roadrunner was Time Warner's initial cable internet. This is post dial-up. And I would play on I don't even know what the servers were, how they did that, but I actually was pretty good. And you think about those online games, these people sit there all day, every day, and they're unbelievable. So you steer clear. I held my own for a little bit. So, and I had the I can't remember what the brand was, but they were nice, 2 heavy little speakers with a subwoofer underneath. So I'd be cranking that and playing, Unreal
Logitech,
Tournament.
wasn't it?
It probably was.
Probably everything.
Awesome.
Everything cool was Logitech back in the day.
They were awesome, and now they can't even make a mouse that doesn't drive me to pull my hair out because we need to load our software for our mouse on your Mac.
Everything needs an app.
Yeah,
an app to work.
Oh, and it's the only Intel. It's the only x86 coded application on my entire M1 desktop.
Oh, really?
Thank
I
you.
thought that was Citrix.
Oh, yeah, and Citrix.
And Citrix.
Yeah, thanks for that.
So that's using the that translation
Rosetta.
layer, right? Rosetta, yeah.
I mean, you don't know. It's completely transparent. And is it slower? I have no way to measure that. I mean, it's running great, but it's just, I open the task manager or the activity monitor and I sort by architecture and I see I had all these Apple, a few Intel. Okay.
It's a refactor of the whole app though, isn't it? To change that.
I don't know what they do. They're the only company that's been able to do it consistently and well. Even Microsoft struggles with this in and out.
Yeah.
They just, it's a part of their DNA in terms of what they do. I mean, there were rumors back in early 2000s, right? That there's an Intel version of Mac OS back when they were on PowerPC. And it was always this thing. And sure enough, they just, the last 4 versions we've been developing them side by side, full function. It's just something that they've been able to maintain. It's pretty impressive.
Wow. Ryan, you mentioned
GPUs. Go ahead, Ryan, or go ahead, Matt.
You mentioned that the video cards, online gaming, online streaming, and that kind of ties into the desktops in that you're doing all that 3D processing at the head end, right?
Yep.
How much of a bandwidth hog is it when you end up gaming like that? Is there that much of a difference? Is there what's the downside between having your 3D processing up in the cloud or somewhere else and the unit I'm interacting with on my desktop or on my
you doing your 3D work in CAD CAM software or whatever? Yeah, I mean, it all depends on how many pixels you're pushing. If you're working in a CAD CAM, that's not going to be pushing too many pixels, right? Because
nothing changes that fast.
Yeah, VMware, Horizon, and Citrix, and all of those are just remote display protocols.
They're video streams, right?
Video streams, essentially.
And we're still doing 264, 265 to compress and only send the change bits and that kind of stuff.
Yep. So the cards do support native 264, 265, which is great because then you're using less bandwidth and a little bit quicker. It's going to be a little bit compute intensive on your end client, but for the most part, you're not going to have much of an issue.
Do I need something on the endpoint that can then decode that 264 to get that stream?
So your endpoint doesn't need to support, but
I'd rather have an ASIC in there to hand off that decode too.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of the thin clients we sell support X265, X264 encoding, decoding.
I know we don't have a lot to do with gaming outside of hobby or whatever, but I still think that how do you get around the problem of latency?
Right.
It's just, is that solvable? I mean, no, let's say cloud gaming.
If you can fix the speed of light, then
well, here's the thing: the speed of light's not a problem, right?
Well, that's what you're talking about with latency, right?
You are, but you're also talking about the actual need to switch and what's it called? The equipment in between that actually does the encapsulation and shifts those packets. Speed of light. How long does it take for a particle of light to make it around the Earth?
It's noticeable.
What's 186,000 miles a second? Something like that.
But it's noticeable, right? If you're on a video call with someone on the other side of the Earth, or even a phone call.
It is, but I'm saying, let's say you go by the speed of light alone, because when we talk about latency between the East and West Coast and the West Coast and Europe, that's not just raw speed of light number. That is the network speed, right? That is the speed of to get through switches and media conversions and all of this. I guess I'm asking, I don't know the answer to that. How much overhead is there in the 50 millisecond round trip time between West Coast and East Coast? How much of that is, if you could eliminate
device computing
let's just bounce a light particle back and forth. How much less than 50 milliseconds is that? And I don't know if that's significant enough, right? But let's assume that it is. Let's say there's no overhead. Well, then there's no solving it. I can't play with a guy over in Australia, a Twitch app, right? A Twitch shooter, something that requires reactions. It's impossible. And cloud gaming is not going to solve that.
I've tried some of the cloud gaming using NVIDIA's GeForce Now, and using my TV with my NVIDIA Shield device connected to my TV with a controller and everything. There is a noticeable delay that I definitely notice. If I were playing, first person shooter, I'd have a lot of trouble.
Right.
But if I'm playing, a slower game, maybe like Witcher 3 or something like that. Or
even like something like a Civ or a SimCity or something like
that. Those Civilization games, I love those.
I love those
were the ones that I played.
I could never get into them.
I still play every one.
My ADD is like,
Conquer,
I can't handle this.
Well, how could you still have ADD when you just need one more turn, Ryan? Just one more turn.
Yeah. I think
it's 4 a.m.
That's the problem, yeah.
Right.
And those turns last an hour sometimes.
Those games, for whatever reason, all the way back to Civ 2, I've always played them. I've always caught on for whatever reason, and I don't play any other games, and then I'll just keep going back to that. And I know that I'm only playing them very shallowly. I am not super deep into the strategy, and yet they're fun. It's easy to pick up and just play.
The right
for sure. Yeah.
I can't do the fast twitch, the first person shooter.
That's all right.
I'm not good enough for that.
I still play Counter-Strike. I'm 41 years old, still playing Counter-Strike. I'm not nowhere near as good as I used to be. And these young whippersnappers are kicking my butt with their ultra fast reflexes.
When I was playing Destiny 2, there was all of the versus environment, all of the NPCs that you'd go kill. That was fine. That was great. But the minute they're like, okay, to get this thing or whatever, you have to go complete 6 missions of this PvP thing. I'm like, oh, this sucks.
Oh,
yeah. I get a dozen kills. I'm like, oh, it'll take 7 days.
The bullet sponge game.
Yeah.
I played the first one. Didn't impress me.
Yeah.
For me, it was, before I moved out West, I was into Halo 3 and all that kind of stuff. But then Call of Duty, that series was still good. And then when I moved out here, that was how I kept in touch with my buddies back East. It was tough because, again, the time change and getting on and playing, but I put the headset on, and then Xbox One came out and they broke all basic features like audio chat and all this. And that was always, if we finally got it working, but that's how I kept in touch. And it's good. But the problem is there's so much shenanigans going on with online gaming that you'd get people with auto aim bots and lag glitching or whatever. They'd mess with a switch, and you swear you hit that guy first, but then you're down, and it just got too frustrating. I don't need more frustration in my life.
Yeah.
Wow.
All that to say, though, with the acceleration, do we have hope? I mean, is this just an NVIDIA, they the only horse in this race, or do we see advancements or changes coming up in this industry?
There's definitely going to be changes. Intel's coming out with their Arctic Sound M line of GPUs for the data center. I think it's going to be 2 different models, a performance and a multi-core type device, depending on your needs, if you're going to be doing a lot of AI versus VDI versus, encoding 30 plus 4K streams or whatever.
Is there a different term that I'm looking for if I'm looking for a card to do AI machine learning type stuff? Or am I still like, hey, I'm going to build this cluster to do machine learning, blah. I need to get some cool video cards for it. There's
definitely some AI ML specific cards out there in the lines. Most of the cards can do both. Obviously, for the higher end AI ML, that would be way overkill for like VDI. But the VDI ones are, can be pretty powerful if you need.
This is, I mean, that's kind of, are we going away yet again or back towards the giant supercomputer cluster thing with this distributed AI nodes? I mean, because that's basically what.
Oh, and you know what they're doing now is they're going to be linking the cards all together with an NV. It's called NVLink on the NVIDIA side. Kind of like when you're bridging,
like an
doing
SLI.
like SLI, exactly. They're doing SLI enterprise-wide over the network. Yeah, of course.
Which is what supercomputers are, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Proprietarily networked, distributed computing.
I need to do a gazillion calculations on where the atoms go
in parallel.
Nuclear explosion. Yeah.
Yeah, but the Intel cards, I'm pretty excited because they're coming out next quarter, apparently, theoretically.
Consumer,
I mean, like you said, competition
for the data center. Consumer got delayed. I saw.
Okay,
so that may be like maybe Q4.
I mean, that's fine for us because when it comes time to our customers asking us about this, and I hate to pick on and point the finger really at NVIDIA here, but a few years ago, they introduced kind of that second level licensing where you bought this not inexpensive card and you want to use it now? Now you have to license it depending on and there's different tiers of licensing. And if you want to, it's just, and it's frustrating because there's nothing we can do about it. It's just the nature of the beast. And I think Intel coming in, if nothing else, even if they don't come in and let's say they perform at half the density as NVIDIA, but they cost a quarter as much. Well, now that's worth it, right? Go. I mean, you have
You're going to load up your server with these cards. Plus, I read from Intel that maybe there's not going to be any licensing to use these because maybe that's going to be the carrot that Intel's giving everybody.
Well, that's the thing. At that point, you don't necessarily have to match them pound for pound in performance. If you become valuable, if you get that value approach, then you could still win.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested to find out the pricing whenever they're available, because
who I think works at NVIDIA that I would love to have on this podcast?
Oh, former IVOXY guy, right?
Ex-IVOXY employee,
Mr. Andrew Bull. So a little blast from the past for those who have been with IVOXY for quite a long time. Or Andrew was one of the earlier IVOXY employees.
Way early, yeah.
Yeah, and great guy. So good friends with a lot of us, and I think we might be able to try to get him on here, and certainly have to do video for that episode because you can't miss this guy's hair. It's beautiful.
That's great.
I hadn't seen him in like 3 years, something like this. And this is before the pandemic, but I was going down to my local McMinimans for, I don't know, a happy hour or something like that. And I'm coming through the parking lot and I spot this guy standing, his back to me in the parking lot, and he's 50 yards away. And boom, that's Andrew Bull. It's just I knew it in my bones. And I walk up to him, and there he is with that smile on his face. And he's just very very discernible, good dude, smart guy.
Yeah.
And I believe, I'm not sure exactly what his role over there is, but I think he's somewhat of an evangelist, a technology officer kind of thing. So it'd be great to have him on and maybe poke fun and pick on him a little bit. I'm sure he'd have a lot of good counters from rebuttals to our, landing these haymakers without him to defend himself here.
Yeah, there's that. I think the biggest one would be that same kind of thing. Like NVIDIA does more than just video cards, right? They're big into that machine learning piece.
I think they're supplying a lot of chips for driving, right? For the self-driving
they are
stuff.
Yeah.
There you go. There's something that's consistent and repetitive.
Well, they're very good at turning purpose-built algorithms into silicon. I think is what their forte is. The AI ML stuff, man. I don't want to necessarily throw too ice water on this, but I'm not saying it's a waste of time. But again, it's one of those things that unless you in my opinion, AI ML is good enough is not good enough. There is no such thing as good enough. What's the saying? Don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough, kind of thing. And I subscribe to that theory in so many ways in general. In terms of AI ML, voice recognition, self-driving, unless it's perfect, I think it's a failure. And I just don't. I'm reading about complaints about Siri, and people saying it's getting worse because it's all ML on the back end. So if you give it crappier crap is coming out.
Yeah.
And I think it was good when the HomePods first came out, or acceptable. And somehow over 4 years, it's gotten worse. And it keeps shifting. And I don't think anyone's back there tuning knobs. I just think it's a self-feeding monster. That might just
be what it needs, is some tuning and some whatnot.
Then it's an algorithm. It's not a neural net. Now it's more steered, which, listen, I'm not against either. It's just, I just feel like will self-driving, fully autonomous cars ever be a thing?
Yeah.
Okay, we're supposed to be flying cars 40 years ago, guys.
Okay, yeah.
I'm more pessimistic.
I think it will.
I'm more pessimistic.
I still think that it's better than, I mean, you say if it's not perfect, but I still think that it's better than what we already have already.
Okay. That's a fair position. Yeah. I just, maybe America being more litigious than some places also prevents some of the things, but, Tesla, and I like what Tesla's done in terms of pushing the envelope on technologies that have been resisted up to this point, right? But if they cause a crash or something like this, that versus you causing a crash, Cozzolino, that's a whole different scope of all of the, anyway.
No one wants to be left holding onto the bag, right?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Musical chairs with car driving.
So Ryan, it's really good to have you on again. I don't know how long it's been. A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. But if we're rounding the corner, we're approaching 100 episodes here. We hope to get you on a little bit more often.
Yeah,
talk about.
Cool.
Do we have any VDI trainings going on or anything like that you've been working with?
I've been doing a bunch of custom classes for some of our clients.
Like a GPU, purpose built.
Yeah.
And very fast and good at it. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. Just to remind, if you want to do a POC of Horizon VDI or virtual desktops and things like that, where you're looking at that remote workforce and how can I give them a better experience, Ryan's your guy to talk to. So definitely hit us up, reach us at podcast@ivoxy.com, or Ryan, if you want to hit him directly, send him spam, sign him up for all kinds of mailing lists. Ryan@ivoxy.com. Yeah.
There you go.
Anyway, Ryan, thanks for joining us, man. It's great chatting with you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Coz, always a pleasure as well.
100%. Yes.
You stay cool in that room up there. Now that it's starting to get warmer.
Just put the AC in.
There you go. Just don't turn it on during the episode. Yeah. So we got to keep these things under 30 minutes because Cozo starts to take clothes off and layers. We can't have that. Not in the age of video. All right.
Got to do them in the morning.
Thanks everybody for listening to yet another episode of Data Center Therapy. Have a great one, everyone.